January 2021. The lights flicker across a marble hallway inside a federal courthouse in Washington, D.C. Servers hum somewhere deep underground, a low electric heartbeat beneath the nation's justice system. Upstairs, a clerk scrolls through sealed documents, unaware that each click is being mirrored, packet by packet, to a machine thousands of miles away. In another hemisphere, a cold glow washes over a hacker's face. The cursor blinks. One last command. The U.S. judiciary's internal filing system, CMECF, begins to unravel. Thousands of restricted court documents silently siphoned off. Criminal indictments, national security cases, evidence logs. Everything the courts tried to keep hidden behind the seal of classified. By the time the first alerts sound, it's too late. Somewhere in the chain, a breach has already crossed a line that was never supposed to be crossed. Judges' decisions, sealed evidence, the very fabric of judicial secrecy now open to unseen eyes. And when the U.S. government finally admits what happened, the question becomes unavoidable. If the courts themselves can't keep their secrets safe, what justice can be trusted? To understand how the guardians of American justice were hacked, one must first understand the system they built and how old ghosts of bureaucracy became backdoors for the modern hacker. In the early 2000s, as courtrooms digitized, the federal judiciary launched an ambitious project, the Case Management Divided by Electronic Case File System, or CM divided by ECF. It was revolutionary for its time, connecting hundreds of federal courts across the United States through a centralized filing network. A lawyer in Texas could upload a motion that would instantly be stored on a government database in Washington. For 2 decades, it worked, mostly, but by 2020, the system was aging. Its architecture, designed for efficiency, wasn't designed for an era of nation-state cyber warfare. Behind its web interface lay servers that hadn't been rebuilt since the days of dial-up, and through those servers ran everything from minor civil cases to sealed documents involving espionage, terrorism, and classified technology. The attackers didn't need to break into the Pentagon, they only needed a doorway into the courthouse. According to reports later unearthed by Politico and Reuters, the breach may have begun quietly, a vulnerability, perhaps, in one district's filing portal. Or maybe it was a stolen credential, reused one too many times by an overworked clerk. What's certain is that by the time investigators noticed, sealed filings across multiple federal courts had already been accessed. The data wasn't financial, it was informational, sensitive, potentially explosive. In those hidden documents lay the deepest layers of the American legal system, sealed indictments waiting for the right moment to unseal, intelligence-linked cases involving wiretaps, secret subpoenas, even covert surveillance programs. The kind of information foreign governments could trade for power or leverage for silence. The discovery sent shockwaves through Washington. The judiciary, a branch often seen as insulated from political and military pressure, was suddenly vulnerable. Congressional committees demanded answers. Cybersecurity agencies called for an overhaul. The Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts confirmed the breach, but few details were ever released publicly. The question no one wanted to say aloud echoed across every encrypted meeting. If the system meant to protect America's secrets had been compromised from within, what else was already gone? It began, as so many breaches do, with silence. Somewhere inside the labyrinth of government networks, a quiet anomaly appeared so small, it looked like an accounting error. But it wasn't numbers that had gone missing. It was access logs, records of who opened what, when, and from where. The CMECF system, home to millions of sealed filings, was being watched from the inside out. The hackers had found their way in through the unglamorous cracks of the federal network, outdated authentication, unpatched web servers, and a legacy architecture too vast to modernize overnight. They weren't smashing windows, they were slipping through unlocked doors left forgotten for years. Each district court used its own instance of the filing system, a patchwork of independent nodes, loosely governed by national standards. Once inside one, the attackers could pivot laterally, district by district, file by file. Every sealed indictment, confidential complaint, and intelligence affidavit flowed across the same digital veins, and the attackers followed the current. For months, nothing seemed wrong. No alarms, no ransom notes, no messages demanding money or fame. This was espionage, not extortion. Whoever was behind it didn't want chaos. They wanted invisibility. In 2020, cybersecurity analysts noticed strange outbound connections from several judicial servers, encrypted data packets traveling to foreign nodes. The timing was precise, the volume small enough to blend into normal traffic. Yet when mirrored against federal network baselines, something felt off. Too consistent, too deliberate. It took months for the administrative office of the U.S. courts to confirm what experts already feared. The judiciary's own backbone had been compromised. What remained unclear was how long the attackers had been inside. The FBI quietly began cross-referencing leaked data on dark web forums with sealed judicial cases. None of the stolen files appeared for sale, a chilling sign that this wasn't about profit. The intelligence community began whispering another name, a group long suspected of ties to Russian intelligence and responsible for high-level intrusions into U.S. government agencies. But in truth, attribution in cyberspace is as slippery as smoke. A single proxy server can turn Moscow into Minneapolis. And yet, the fingerprints looked familiar. Precision targeting, focus on intelligence-related cases, the avoidance of publicity. While the public heard only fragments, technical anomaly, possible exposure, further investigation, behind closed doors, panic spread. Federal judges, whose words carry the weight of law, suddenly realized their chambers were not immune. Their most private rulings, sealed testimonies, and classified proceedings had been living on a system now known to be porous. Justice itself had been hacked, and no one yet knew what the thieves were really after. When investigators finally began piecing together what had been taken, they realized this wasn't a simple breach. It was a cartography of American justice itself. Each sealed filing represented a moment before revelation, secret indictments waiting to unseal, covert warrants for surveillance, national security investigations conducted in silence. Together, they formed a map of the government's hidden hand, who was being watched, charged, or protected, and now, someone else had seen it. Inside those stolen files were clues to ongoing espionage cases, counter-terrorism operations, even classified programs tied to intelligence collection. It wasn't just names and numbers, it was context, timelines, witnesses, evidence. To an adversary, such insight is gold. To the United States, it was exposure of its judicial soul. The Administrative Office of the U.S. Courts released a terse statement in early 2021. An apparent compromise of the CMECF system has occurred. The judiciary is working closely with the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI. No press conference, no admission of scale, just the cold language of bureaucracy trying to contain a wildfire. But inside secure facilities, the truth was harder to contain. Federal judges received emergency briefings. National security cases were manually reviewed and, in some instances, sealed again under new identifiers. Some prosecutors were told to assume their adversaries knew more than they should. And for the first time, the judicial branch, a body constitutionally independent from the executive, was forced to coordinate with intelligence agencies to repair its defenses. The exposure had ripple effects beyond classified cases. Corporate lawsuits involving trade secrets, whistleblower complaints under seal, even high-profile criminal cases involving informants, all potentially compromised. Defense attorneys began quietly asking whether any of their clients' data had been viewed. They got few answers. In Washington, the tone shifted from denial to urgency. Cybersecurity experts warned that what happened to the courts was a microcosm of a larger truth. America's critical systems weren't just outdated, they were vulnerable by design. Layers of bureaucracy had become layers of risk. By 2022, congressional oversight hearings turned the breach into a symbol. Lawmakers demanded modernization of the judiciary's IT infrastructure, calling it a matter of national security. But modernization takes years. Hacking takes seconds. And somewhere, perhaps in Moscow, perhaps in a nameless server farm hidden behind 10 VPN layers, someone still had the data, not sold, not erased, just kept, waiting. By 2023, the breach had become more than a cybersecurity story. It was a constitutional crisis in digital form. The judiciary, the one branch of government designed to stand apart, had been forced to kneel to the realities of cyber warfare. And for the first time in its history, the quiet sanctity of the courts collided with the chaos of the internet. Behind closed doors, federal judges convened emergency sessions to discuss what they'd long considered impossible, that foreign actors might be reading their sealed rulings before they were even signed. There were whispers of judicial opinions being altered mid-transmission, of timestamps that didn't match, of clerks whose credentials had been cloned. Nothing was proven, but the fear alone was enough to shake confidence at the highest levels. The administrative office of the U.S. courts began rebuilding from within. Servers were replaced, authentication systems hardened, offline redundancies created. For months, Staff were forbidden to upload sealed materials electronically. They returned to paper filings and physical drives, a regression to the analog world, where safety meant slowness. Congress demanded answers. Testimonies filled the Capitol. Cybersecurity officials, court administrators, and outside consultants detailing how a system built for transparency had become a liability for secrecy. Cybersecurity is now a matter of judicial integrity, one senator declared. If our courts can be compromised, our democracy can be rewritten in silence. But behind the political theater was something more human, a reckoning. The judiciary's trust in its own infrastructure was broken. Federal employees spoke of feeling watched, even when nothing on their screens looked wrong. IT administrators worked nights tracing invisible pathways of code, looking for ghosts left behind. And for the legal community, a haunting realization set in. The truth of justice is only as strong as the system that guards it. Meanwhile, intelligence officials scrambled to assess damage. If sealed filings about national security cases had been exposed, then witnesses, informants, and covert operations could all be at risk. Yet, to this day, no public evidence has surfaced, showing the data was weaponized. That silence is its own kind of terror. The absence of proof isn't proof of safety. By 2024, new programs were underway. Endpoint encryption, network segmentation, joint monitoring with DHS. The judiciary began speaking a new language: firewalls, zero-trust architecture, quantum-resistant encryption. But no patch could fix what had already been lost. The illusion that justice, sealed by the court, was beyond reach. The breach had not just opened files. It had opened a wound deep, invisible, and enduring. The breach of the U.S. judiciary did more than expose a system, it exposed a philosophy. For centuries, the courts had been built on faith. Faith that documents sealed by a judge stayed sealed, that testimony given in confidence remained protected, that justice, though slow, was secure. But in the digital age, faith without security is naivete. When the dust settled, a quiet transformation began. The judiciary, an institution that once resisted modernization, started speaking the language of the cyber age. Firewalls became as essential as gavels. Encryption replaced envelopes. Where law once governed men, now code governed access. Inside the administrative office, new teams were formed: digital forensics units, cybersecurity task forces, data integrity monitors. The goal wasn't just to defend, it was to evolve. They began auditing every corner of the CMECF system, tracing the flow of information like investigators at a crime scene. They found weaknesses in plain sight: unsecured endpoints, shared credentials, legacy software that hadn't seen an update since before smartphones existed. The human side was even harder to fix. Judges, attorneys, and clerks who had grown up in the analog world now faced a new reality: that even justice must obey the laws of cybersecurity. Training sessions replaced seminars. Password rotations became routine. The culture of the courts, once steeped in tradition, was learning humility through fear. Outside the marble halls, the public's reaction was mixed. Some saw the breach as an inevitable symptom of an outdated system. Others saw it as proof that even the highest institutions were not immune to failure. But beneath the criticism lay something deeper: a loss of innocence. If justice itself could be hacked, what did transparency really mean? Technology had promised accessibility. Now, it demanded accountability. The breach forced a painful paradox upon the courts. In a world that demands open information, how do you keep secrets safe? By 2025, reforms were underway. A new architecture dubbed Next Gen CMECF began rolling out nationwide. Built on zero-trust principles, every user, every device, every connection had to verify itself continuously. Judges no longer relied solely on clerks or IT departments. They had cybersecurity liaisons, encryption officers, and automated monitoring dashboards that alerted them to anomalies in real time. But behind every update, every line of code, was the same unspoken truth: trust, once lost, never returns the same. The breach of the U.S. judiciary wasn't the end of justice, it was its redefinition. A reminder that in the digital era, power no longer lies in who holds the gavel, but in who controls the data beneath it. Somewhere in the vast architecture of the internet, fragments of America's justice system still drift: sealed filings, encrypted evidence, names that were never meant to be spoken aloud. No one knows where the data lives now. Perhaps it was stored, encrypted again, waiting to be leveraged. Perhaps it was destroyed, erased the moment its purpose was fulfilled. But the silence surrounding it has become its own kind of haunting. Every cyber breach leaves a ghost, and this one lingers in the corridors of federal power. Officials don't speak about it publicly anymore. The reports have been buried under layers of classified reviews, each one stamped with the quiet admission that some breaches can't be fully undone. Even now, years later, The judiciary's new systems hum with paranoia, every login logged, every access point traced, every byte accounted for. But no patch, no firewall, no encryption key can erase the knowledge that once someone was inside. In the years since, cybersecurity experts have called the incident the judicial Snowden, not for what was leaked, but for what it revealed, that the institutions designed to protect the law had failed to protect themselves. The breach didn't topple the courts, it didn't halt justice, but it planted a question deep in the American psyche, a question still unanswered. Who watches the watchers when even they can be hacked? For the men and women who serve inside those courts, the breach was more than a technical failure. It was a wound to the very idea of trust. Some judges now keep their most sensitive rulings offline, typed on air-gapped computers. Some clerks speak of the day the alerts came in the disbelief, the fear, the realization that something ancient had cracked open in the digital age. And for the hackers, whoever they were, the silence may have been the greatest victory of all. No ransom, no manifesto, no traceable signal. Just an empty courtroom echoing with questions no one can answer. When historians look back on this moment, they might see it not as a single breach, but as a warning. A warning that in a world where justice lives inside servers, truth itself is only as safe as the weakest password. The courts have rebuilt, the systems are stronger, the walls higher, but somewhere, in the invisible folds of the internet, the shadow archive remains a ghost file of America's most secret cases, locked away, waiting, watching, and maybe, just maybe, still listening.